So to talk a lot more about past issues tied to American presidents and how the Epstein discussion may affect President Trump, I want to bring into the conversation now political analyst Brian Sobel. Brian, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. Let's get to it, though. There have been several controversies throughout the years that have plagued American presidents. When you're starting off thinking about this discussion, I mean, Richard Nixon and Watergate, of course, Bill Clinton and what he dealt with Monica Lewinsky. This is a long history of this happening here in our country.
No question about it. Controversies and scandals go back to the beginning of our republic. And a whole litany of those. Ronald Reagan with Iran-Contra, the Teapot Dome scandal in the early 20s with Warren G. Harding and his administration, letting land go from a place near Casper, Wyoming called Teapot Dome, which we've all read about in our history, which was a place where they were storing oil reserves for the Navy, and it somehow, through the administration, got brought into private hands. So these scandals go way back in history, and part of it, Christina, is that the president is one person, but it really is a whole administration, and you've got a lot of people working oftentimes at cross purposes.
And so I do want to put up some video footage that we have here of Richard Nixon also showing. I want to speak a bit more about him as well, as particularly with Watergate. We know that that was one of those that was talked about for several years to come. I have to ask you, Brian, ultimately, Nixon resigned over that controversy. What more do we know about how this affected him during his time in office leading up to that ultimate resignation?
Well, we know from talking with people in his administration and from all the testimony during that era that the administration ground to a halt. I mean, everything became about Watergate, this burglary at the Watergate complex, which was and is apartments, townhouses, that sort of thing, right on the Potomac. Many people who have been around Washington, D.C. have certainly looked at Watergate. I have many times. And in there, the Democrats had an office, and there's a piece of footage on it, and Republican operatives went in there to try to bug the Democrat National Committee. The issue was, though, and an irony, is that the Republicans were not in any trouble of losing the election. And so at that time, it was something where you kind of wondered why Richard Nixon would have been involved in that. And we don't know, even today, the true extent of his involvement. We have bits and pieces, and we have interviews with Nixon, including the famous David Frost interviews, where Nixon admitted to being paranoid about what the Democrats might be up to. So from this third-rate burglary came a resignation for the first time in American history of a president.
And so it goes on to show just how that affected. So I appreciate you, Brian, for adding some context to this. But he's not the only one that is one of those really high-profile cases. I want to take one that is sort of more in the vein of what we're seeing now as it pertains to Jeffrey Epstein and some of these files. But we have to talk about Bill Clinton and his sexual escapades. That ended up being a massive scandal as well. When you're looking at that one, do you see any similarities? But ultimately, also going back to Monica Lewinsky and what happened there, how did that affect Bill Clinton and the policies that he wanted to get enacted at the time?
These things have a huge effect on a presidency, because people end up focusing, like in the case of Bill Clinton, on the Monica Lewinsky situation. And so internally, these administrations kind of grind to a halt as they try to work through this. And of course, Bill Clinton was not forthcoming with Monica Lewinsky about the Monica Lewinsky situation, and it could have brought down his presidency. I don't see that in the same context with Donald Trump and Epstein. Interestingly, in this case, you have people from both parties with an interest in knowing what are in the Epstein files, if there are such things, and on the Epstein list, if there's some Epstein list, which has not been conclusively determined. Because for Democrats, they want to see perhaps that the president's name is on the list and that he may have engaged in nefarious activities. And for people on the right, they want to see whether a person like Bill Clinton is on that list and whether he was involved in nefarious activities, all surrounding Jeffrey Epstein. So there's a whole lot of people in this current controversy that want answers. And usually in scandals, presidential scandals, it's one side trying to take advantage of the other side. For example, in 1884, when Grover Cleveland was running for office, he had fathered a child out of wedlock 10 years earlier, and Republicans were savaging him about the situation because he had the person he was involved in committed to an asylum, and the son put up for adoption. And so Republicans were running campaigns with a little kid saying, Ma, where's my pa? And when the election was concluded and the Democrat had won, their response was, off to the White House, ha, ha, ha. So I only say that to illustrate that sexual related scandals and scandals in general go way back in American history.
And so we're continuing to take that live look there at the White House. And as you mentioned, Brian, I want to dive into how this affects different parties. You've been talking about whether or not a party stands together in the face of these controversies, or whether or not they split with the person who's facing it, namely the U.S. president. I want to put this up on the screen as well. This is just one of those remarks that we have there from the FBI Deputy Director, Dan Bongino, who's been very outspoken about the Epstein files. I'm going to read it out for folks who may not have seen it as well, saying, during my tenure here as the Deputy Director of the FBI, I have repeatedly relayed to you that things are happening that might not be immediately visible, but they are happening. The Director and I are committed to stamping out public corruption and the political weaponization of both law enforcement and intelligence operations. It is a priority for us, but what I have learned in the course of our properly predicated and necessary investigations into these aforementioned matters has shocked me down to my core. We cannot run a republic like this. I'll never be the same after learning what I've learned. We are going to conduct these righteous and proper investigations by the book and in accordance with the law. We are going to get the answers we deserve. I have to ask you, Brian, he's not openly saying, I stand with President Trump in that statement. Is there more that we can read into this about maybe how this is splitting the Republican Party?
We always try to read between the lines, right? And so that's what we would do with that statement. And I think at the end of the day, to use that often used phrase, he is expressing frustration and great concern about political shenanigans. In this case, that may have affected Donald Trump or an election or a multiple of elections. And so I think people can take him at his word that he's genuine in saying that he's very, very worried and it's something he's never seen before. But my answer always is, if you get very, very concerned about things in America, as we all should be, it isn't the first time. You can go back through American history and find that this has happened many, many times. We're a big, broad-shouldered country, and we'll come out of it. But the change here a little bit is this new medium of social media. Back in the days of, Grover Cleveland and his sexually related scandal, 1884, you had newspapers and that sort of thing. But as we have moved forward and now social media is so pervasive, what you have now are stories popping up. We just saw it before this segment in LA with the deputies being killed, and all sorts of rumors and innuendo pop up. So trying to manage all of this these days is a lot more difficult with social media. For example, you would have never seen a comment at that length probably in the past, except in a newspaper from the FBI #2 or anybody else. But now on social media, there's this huge amount of information out there that really kind of changes the complexion of these various cases. And again, whether it's U.S. Grant and his scandals, or Grover Cleveland, or Warren G. Harding, or Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton, and Ronald Reagan, it just goes on and on. And again, I think it's because the presidency is a big bureaucracy of its own, and a lot of people are acting, as I said earlier, in cross purposes. But we have seen scandals take down a president, and exhibit #1 is Richard Milhouse Nixon.
I appreciate you for adding that context. And again, we don't know exactly what Dan Bongino was, again, talking about during that statement, but it is timely as we're focusing on these latest developments that have to do with the Epstein files. I do also want to give folks an update. We do know that a key House committee is looking into the investigation of Epstein for those sex trafficking crimes, also working to subpoena President Trump's Department of Justice for files in the case, as well as hold a deposition of Epstein's former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell. Of course, we also know she has been granted since limited immunity. This is according to multiple outlets reporting anonymous sources. It's potential that that's there. I want to put this up for folks who maybe want to get in on the conversation with us as we're getting that update. We have this live now on our website on livenowfromfox.com/connect. You can vote in this, but would you agree with Ghislaine Maxwell being granted a pardon if that's possible? We are able to scan that QR code and go to our website and see that in full and make sure your voice is heard there. But Brian, as we're talking about some of these updates, how is the president going to be able to navigate these next few months with this hanging over the head? Does he have a course of action that would be best suited for his party to continue to get things happening and moving there in Washington?
Well, I hope he's getting the advice that you just have to release what you have. He has already indicated that there's not a lot of there, certainly in terms of himself. And if these files, lists, and things like that implicate other people, get on with it. One thing that I think we've learned from American history is that it's not always the crime, it's the cover-up. Again, going back to Watergate. The crime in Watergate was a very low-level burglary, but the cover-up that went all the way to the president is what brought down Richard Milhouse Nixon. So taking a page from history, the president, Donald Trump, should just release everything and let the chips fall where they may. But this poll that you have on the screen right now, that we have on the screen, I think says it all. I don't think people want to grant her a pardon. Her crimes were egregious. Jeffrey Epstein's crimes were egregious. And I think Donald Trump should be very, very careful about whether he would issue a pardon. Now, you've heard me many times on air talk about American history. Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Milhouse Nixon when he took office as president, when Nixon resigned. I think there's every indicator from American history that pardoning Richard Nixon cost Gerald Ford his election to the presidency, and after he filled out Nixon's term. So, granting a pardon can be fraught with lots of problems unless you have the American people behind you.
Brian, I'm glad you mentioned that because a lot of folks, of course, we also know that President Trump, he was asked this question. He did say that he hasn't thought about pardoning the Epstein accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, but did say that he's allowed to do it, which is interesting as well. But again, we even just saw it with the outgoing president, Joe Biden. He pardoned his son. So pardons have also been used throughout history as well.
Absolutely. Pardons are as old as the American Republic as well. Some presidents have used them more than others. And, and the data's available. What Joe Biden did on his way out of office was he made sure that he covered his family, including his brother and all sorts of people in the administration, from
Uh,
future prosecution, potential prosecution. And that was his right. I don't know that it'll sit well in history,
all right.
but it is
Again,
what it is. You know, I think a lot of people could empathize with his pardoning of Hunter Biden. You're asking a father whether he would pardon his son, who may be facing all kinds of criminal charges. Most fathers and mothers, I think, would probably take that decision, in all honesty. But he also pardoned a lot of other people, everybody in his family. So was that legitimate? We don't know, but that is the power of the presidency.
all right, so we certainly appreciate Brian Sobel for being with us, political analyst. Again, this was the question on the screen. There are some folks now weighing in at this point with just over 300 votes into our newsroom here. 86% saying no. Brian, before I let you go, does this surprise you?
The poll results, no, because small sample, and I know many more people will weigh in, but you're at this point talking about pardoning Maxwell, who has only once, it appears, spoken with anybody about the true facts of this case and the facts of this case and this idea of limited immunity. Nobody knows really what that means because somehow her term, 20 years, may be reduced. Who knows whether the president would take the decision to pardon her because she is forthcoming? Who knows? So there's a lot of unknowns here. And Christina, we'll just have to see how this plays out over time. But no, it doesn't surprise me that people say she shouldn't be pardoned when you learn the facts of the case. I mean, this is, you know, the facts are horrible, those that we know in terms of sex trafficking.
All right, so we certainly appreciate political analyst Brian Sobel for being with us here on this Saturday to break down really one of the top stories of the week, one that's continuing to develop. And we'll continue to bring you those updates here on Live Now from Fox as they come into our newsroom. I certainly appreciate you for joining us today, Brian.
Christina, have a great day.